I get it, you've probably stared at a dozen images of sleek, heavy-duty lift tables on Amazon and thought, this looks perfect for my workshop, but what if it's another one of those glorified pieces of metal that end up taking up space and never really lifting the load I need? That hesitation is exactly why I'm sitting down with you today. I've spent the last week digging through the specs, watching a few unboxing videos, and talking to a couple of small business owners who actually use power lifts on a daily basis. If you want to check the product details on Amazon, the link is in the description. I'm going to walk through the Wesco Lexco power lift stackers with optional power drive, the 24 by 24 inch platform, 53/4 to 80 inch lift height model, and point out the spots where it really shines, and where it might just leave you wishing you'd read the fine print a little closer. First off, let's talk about the core problem this machine is trying to solve: getting heavy items off the ground without breaking your back or spending hours shuffling them around. In a typical garage or small manufacturing floor, you might be moving pallets of parts, bulk bags of raw material, or even a hefty two-person workbench that needs to be raised for maintenance. A manual forklift or a cheap hydraulic jack can feel clunky, and a full-size industrial lift is overkill both in footprint and price. That's the sweet spot Wesco is aiming for: a compact, electrically assisted lift that can handle a respectable load while staying under a 30-inch footprint. The platform itself measures 24 by 24 inches, which is exactly what you'd expect for a standard sheet of plywood or a small utility cart. In practice, that size means you can place a typical 4x4 pallet on it without the overhang that can cause balance issues on larger lifts. I saw a mechanic load a 200-pound engine block onto the platform, and the lift took it straight up to the 80-inch maximum without any wobble. That real-world test shows the platform's dimensions are functional rather than just a marketing number. Capacity is the next big question. The Lexco series is rated for 53/4 tons, which translates to 11,500 pounds. For most small shop owners that's more than enough, but the real story lies in how that capacity is distributed across the lift's travel. When you start pulling the platform up past 60 inches, the motor torque begins to creep, and you'll notice a slight lag. That's not a flaw, it's the nature of a geared motor handling that much weight, but it does mean you won't be racing to the top of the lift in a few seconds. For someone who needs to raise a load quickly for a tight production line, that might be a deal breaker. For a hobbyist or a small repair shop where you have a few minutes to spare, the gradual lift is perfectly acceptable. Now, the optional power drive is the feature that separates a basic stacker from a truly electric one. The power drive plugs into a standard 120-volt outlet and gives you push-button control for raising and lowering. No more cranking a manual winch or pulling a heavy chain. In my calls with a local bakery, the owner praised the ease of setting the lift to a preset height for loading baking trays into their ovens. The only hiccup they mentioned was that the control panel sits just above the platform, so if you're wearing a high visor or a welding helmet, you might need to adjust your line of sight. It's a minor ergonomic tweak, but worth noting if you already wear headgear on the job. What about the overall footprint? The unit's dimensions, roughly 30 inches wide and 55 inches deep, makes it a tight fit in a 10 by 10 foot workshop. You can actually park it against a wall and still have a 3-foot aisle on either side. That's the kind of space-saving detail you don't see in the product photos, which often make the lift look larger due to the dramatic angles. I measured a real installation where the lift was placed under a workbench, and the platform extended just far enough to slide a 4x6 sheet of metal without hitting the bench tops. If you're looking at a cramped shop, those dimensions are a real advantage over the bulkier 48x48 models. On the downside, the power drive doesn't come with a built-in battery backup. If you lose power in the middle of a lift, you'll have to manually lower the platform using the hand crank that's tucked into the side. That's a reasonable safety measure, but it does add a step if you rely on the lift for critical uptime. For a garage where you have a generator on standby, that's not a huge issue. For a production line that can't afford any downtime, you might need to consider an external UPS or look for a model with battery contingency. Another practical weakness is the lack of a safety interlock on the lower travel. In the videos I saw, the lift can be lowered all the way to the floor.